Okay, so turn down the fan a little bit. Keep that defroster on though, because it's icy today. So this one, I want to talk about meta stuff some more, and I guess this one will relate even less to D&D, but the same through line I talked about at the end of the last video is going to be the same. It's, it depends on. It doesn't depend exactly how viable something is, because players are going to constantly compare their options against each other. And that gets really difficult to do. And ultimately, I think what you want the conclusion players to come to is it's a toss-up. You could do this or this, they're both around the same. Because, option 1 might kill monsters a little sooner, but option 2 has more survivability, so they can wait, no, I'm going straight. That road isn't closed down anymore. Comparing a fighter to a barbarian. The fighter might just do more damage in general, though with Great Weapon Master and Reckless Attack, that might not be the case, but either way, I feel like fighter and barbarian is generally a really good comparison in that way, because a fighter tends to do more damage and barbarian has more survivability, generally. Paladin comes in and fucks that all up. Now, there's nothing inherent about Paladin that actually makes it more survivable than fighter, except that it has spell slots, but those spell slots are also their damage, so that's kind of a wash, I feel like. Everyone does talk about how crazy Paladin is, it's a tank, it's a damage dealer, it's a this, it's a that, kinda. You need charisma, but especially in point buy games, a Paladin is not going to have crazy high charisma because they have to have strength and constitution at the same time. So their charisma isn't going to be crazy high. It's just not a thing. It'll be good, and they'll have proficiency in persuasion, deception, intimidation, whatever. But it's not going to be crazy. But not really what I wanted to get into. Kind of wanted to bring up Marvel Rivals again, and maybe some other games. Marvel Rivals is just about 1 year old now. Wait, I think it's a year old on the 6th of December, which is in 2 days, something like that. So it's a 1 year old game. The players have had a lot of time to sit with it and learn it, and you can kind of see in how the discussion is now versus how the discussion was back at the beginning. At the beginning of the game, there's lots of question marks. Nobody really fully understands anything. I remember at the beginning of the game, Wolverine was seen as trash. He was just not very good compared to all of the other melee duelists, and then they figured out, oh wait, he's really good against tanks, he's a tank buster, oh okay. And even there were players talking about that at the beginning, but it still wasn't really understood, because a lot of the time these things need to be digested. They need time to sit in the meta and everybody to really see and think about it, because something like Wolverine, even if he's good in one specific task, one specific role and directive, because role means, tank or vanguard duelist strategist. So in one specific play style, if they're not doing that play style, then they're not good. But nowadays, everything is a lot more settled, even though there's shakeups with new characters and stuff. And something that's been going on is there's a lot of power creep, a lot. Almost, and you can kind of see how much power creep there is in how much people talk about whoever the new character is. Like, the most recent character is Gambit. He's a strategist, great decision making him not a duelist, but specific Marvel Rivals design and character roles and stuff. That's a whole separate discussion. Maybe I'll make a video about that. But just to condense a bunch of thoughts about that game and hero design and stuff. But I mean, I'm not some kind of expert on Marvel Rivals by any stretch. I haven't played it in like probably 6 months, since a little after Ultron. No, I think I played it after when Phoenix came out, maybe. I was trying to play Ultron. So, as an aside, I was super excited for Ultron. Like, he's a really cool character. I like him aesthetically and narratively. And he came out and his kit was like super fucking boring. He places a drone on one guy and then he shoots the other team. And this is also an aside I want to get into. I think Permanent Flight, holds a lot of their design back. Because it's... The developers are afraid of Flight in a lot of ways. And I think the season Ultron came out proved why. Because Flight... I forgot my headphone case. Flight is a problem because it's not super powerful, but it's annoying. A lot of characters can't, like a lot of the melee characters can't do anything against Flight. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do? They're up there. Whereas a lot of other characters are just like, oh, I just aim up. And it's not really that big of an issue at all. So Flight is one of those like weirdly compounding balance issues. It's kind of the ZWEI or Garchomp problem that's not going to make any sense. Let me explain. So ZWEI was a character in Soul Calibur 5, and he was bad. He was the worst character in the game. The developers hamstrung him all over the place. I'm on that loud part of the road, so we're gonna reiterate some points. So ZWEI was a hamstrung character because he was almost a puppet character. And a puppet character isn't something you usually see in a 3D game like Soul Calibur. He could summon this big wolf spirit, and most of the time it was just like another attack, because the whole time, like while you're summoning the wolf spirit, ZWEI is doing like a pose, so he's not actionable. You can't move him around. So it's essentially the same as him just swinging as far as like animation lock and actionable time. But he had one or two moves where he could summon the wolf and then continue to move, and then the wolf would do stuff. That was where the developers were afraid. So they just hamstrung him all fucking over the place. Almost all of his wolf attacks, if they were done on block, they were punishable. Like, ZWEI would do a move, then summon the wolf. The opponent could just like step or duck or a variety of things, avoid the wolf and get a punish. Like, it was terrible. And it was very obviously the developers were just afraid of making him good, or they just wanted him to be bad. And the lead developer, the producer of that game, said in an interview, he likes when there are bad characters in the game because it's exciting when that character wins a tournament. Extremely flawed philosophy, because one, that shit was exciting when fighting games were niche. When, there were little pockets of competitive players that would show up, and then every once in a while, some unknown guy would roll through and clean house. Well, that doesn't happen nowadays because, one, there is consistent online play. That is where you get the majority of your experience. And there are forums and online venues that people can use to discuss the game. So information gets spread way faster. You don't have like some bootleg VHS that somebody recorded at a tournament of somebody doing some insane shit with some character nobody knows about. That doesn't happen anymore. There's YouTube videos and guides and all sorts of crap. So all that information gets spread way faster. So ZWEI was a shitty character and he shouldn't have been shitty because the developers were afraid or they wanted to make him bad. A more modern example is Pokken. It was a Pokemon fighting game developed by Namco. It was released in 2016 on the Wii U. Boy, did that system fucking hold things back. God. Because I was running tournaments for that game at the time. God, that was a fucking nightmare. But anyway, Garchomp was a weird character because the game had a system where instead of like counter hits, it had a critical hit system. And it had this rock, paper, scissors triangle where attacks, there were 3 types of attacks. There were just attack, there were grabs, and there were counter attacks. Which counter attacks had some sort of like auto guard to their startup usually. Grabs were grabs, and attacks were attacks. And the way it worked is attack beat grab, grab beat counterattack, and counterattack beat attack. And if you were performing an attack, you couldn't be grabbed. If you were grab went right through all of the auto guard stuff that counterattack had, and counterattacks obviously blocked attacks during their startup. And the system wasn't very clean because it wasn't. Often there were like edge cases, and depending on your frame advantage and the exact situation, sometimes you couldn't get out of a grab with an attack, or sometimes like there was gaps in the counterattack after the auto guard and between when your attack came out, so you could like your opponent could punch you in between that. Like there were lots of like edge case scenarios, but Garchomp was a character that really, quote, took advantage of this system because he had 3 attacks that if they were counter attacks, they did double damage and had extra animations. And those attacks were not very good at their jobs. His attacks that did this were not very good. Often in the game, the Garchomp player was trying to circumvent this system instead of like trying to guess correctly and land a critical attack. But the developers kind of designed Garchomp as if that was really good. So he suffered in a lot of areas, like his quick interrupts were comparatively really slow. His grab was really short range and low damage. His like dedicated attack buster or throw buster, like the attack you would use to break out of throws, was generally really bad. Like lots of things like that. And the only thing that saved the character was the second main gimmick he had was a run stance, which there was a bunch of moves he could do that would transition into run, and out of run he could act almost instantly. So, and on top of that, he had a charged heavy attack, which you could charge it, and then if you did the air version, guess what? It was instant, and it was a launcher, and it was plus on block. So the only thing that saved this character was a completely busted tool that he could use to do like almost half your life in damage if he did it correctly. Like, so his main like gimmicky critical hit system was pointless. Big fucking surprise. So, what am I getting at here? Stuff with, like, in Marvel Rivals, the characters that have permanent flight holds their design back. It's a big problem. It's either it becomes like really, really counter-picky, where like some characters just can't do shit against this flying character, and other characters it's like, oh, they're flying? I don't even care. Like, that's not a factor. And you see it in a lot of their hero releases. It's either this character is meta-defining, like Gambit. He's really, really strong. He's a fantastic third support. He's not a main healer. Great, more third support bullshit. More triple support meta nonsense. And then you've got characters like Ultron, which are really bad. They don't do anything. Their healing is incredibly weak, and they nerfed it. Blade. He failed to make any real impact on the meta, and instead of buffing him, because his main gimmick was like he has anti-heal, and that was his main claim to fame. That was his main purpose. Well, instead of buffing how he works and making him really good, they just gave anti-heal to a bunch of other characters. So he's still kind of bad. And when I say he's kind of bad, a lot of these characters are usable, but there's no reason to use them over other characters. It's the same kind of thing as like Pokemon. Like I talked about in the last video, you could go with a dedicated Chansey counter, Blissey counter, or you could go with a Pokemon that kind of counters Blissey and does the job, but also does other things. And most of the time, you're not going to need a dedicated Blissey counter because not every team is going to run Blissey. So if they don't run Blissey, that whole character slot is like wasted, is completely pointless. So, you know, meta gets really funky, character design gets really funky, and ultimately, you can't really make a balanced game 100%. Like, you just got to get it in the ballpark. And a lot of the time, you've got characters like ZWEI, you've got characters like Garchomp that kind of skirt those edges where it's like, good enough, ship it. Garchomp was kind of accidentally good enough because he had a bunch of other tools. And this is why I really like redundant design. Like, if a character is supposed to be good at like pressure, give them multiple ways to do it. Because if they've only got like one really dialed in way to do like block pressure in a fighting game, odds are there's going to be a character that can beat it, and then that character's like got like really weird matchups where he's good in a lot of matchups, but if the opponent picks this one character, you're hosed. You can't do shit. And that's never a good feeling. Or you've got cases like ZWEI where just don't pick the character, he doesn't exist. And that doesn't happen as much anymore in modern fighting game design. There's not a lot of cases where this character's shit, they don't exist, don't pick them. Or you've got cases like Marvel Rivals, where there's a lot of characters that are like, there's no real reason to pick them. You should probably pick somebody else. Like, other characters are going to be better. When you've got those characters like Thor, where he's like, he can work, but he's not a main tank. You need at least one more tank with him, because Thor is kind of like a hybrid DPS, essentially. He's just like, he's a DPS in a tank's body, more or less. Or like Richards with Reed, Mr. Fantastic, he's kind of the opposite. He plays like a tank, but he's a DPS. So you get like really weird situations like that. Or you've got Ultron, where there's really no reason to pick him at all. Like, oh yeah, he does good damage. All the other strategists can do the same fucking damage. Like, Yeah, Ultron's damage is really dramatic because it's like 150 damage in a single shot. But that shot takes like almost 2 seconds to actually fire because it's a ray, it's a concentrated beam with a burst at the end, and then he has this like big lag time between shots. So he can only like do that. He like does damage for 2 seconds and then does nothing for a second and a half, and then he does big damage, or maybe it's like, it's this big on and off with a big lag time between. Whereas like Rocket, his Gatling gun does the same thing, but it's continuous, so it's not as dramatic. Mantis, if she can keep hitting headshots, she can do the same damage. Same thing with Warlock. Like, it's the same shit. And unless they buff Ultron to just be one more interesting and have much better healing, he's not worth picking. Like, really, they should just lower the damage of his shot a little bit. Maybe make it faster to come out. Like, reduce the lag time between, so he has roughly the same, like, actual DPS, like, actual damage on average per second, and just make him a better healer. Do something. Like, there's a lot, like, he needs a real rework is what he needs. And I've seen stuff like, give his firewall, that thing where he gives shields to himself and whoever's on the drone. Give that a cleanse so he can purge harmful status effects. He needs more utility. Maybe he needs a second drone, or just like something I've seen. The drone, it works the way it currently does, but every time he does damage or lands a headshot, that drone gets an additional burst of healing or something. That would be fine. Just something. But so that was a lot of design talk, not as much meta, but it kind of was. That's all I got for today.